When I was in law enforcement, I saw people at their worst. I saw drug dealers, gangbangers, murderers, molesters, you name it. And being exposed to that kind of environment tends to make law enforcement officers cynical. They see that side of people so often that it affects their attitude towards everybody. Part of that is a good thing for law enforcement officers. It's what keeps them alive, keeps them sharp. But the dark side of that is that law enforcement officers tend to see everybody in that same light. They think that all people are driven by selfish motives and that no one can be trusted, which is obviously can cause a lot of problems in just relationships of any kind, especially between husbands and wives, and oftentimes in law enforcement, the divorce rate is much higher for that very reason. But cynicism isn't just specific to law enforcement. We're all affected by it. I mean, think about it. When we started out, when we were young, we were idealistic and hopeful and full of trust, and then we're exposed to the sin of the world, and we begin to, that slippery slope in towards cynicism. People disappoint us and reject us and hurt us, and we project that past into our future. We look at the way people had hurt us in the past and we assume they're just going to continue to hurt us in the future, kind of generalizing everything. And that cynicism begins to soak into our souls, and we begin to believe that people are foolish to trust people, other people, because they know that they will only be victimized by it. So they stop trusting, stop hoping, stop believing. Cynicism is like dark shades of, or like sunglasses. And we look through, the way that we look at people is through that dark lens, and that's the only way we see people. We begin to think it's safer to mistrust people to prevent us from being hurt again. And so looking through that dark lens has an impact on, again, on our relationships with other people. But we need not be known as cynics. As followers of Jesus Christ, we should not be known as cynics, having a cynical attitude. We know that people have a corrupt nature, but we also know there's more to the story. We know that Jesus came into the world to restore a God image, that God image in which we were all created, believers and non-believers alike. We were all created in the image of God, and that image is still there. It's just covered up with the soil of sin. And so we know that image is there, and that Jesus came to bring light into the darkness, and that he came to bring freedom to the prisoner. He came to bring power to those who feel powerless. We can conquer cynicism in our own lives when we recognize, when we are looking them through the dark lens of the shades of cynicism, and begin to look through the clear lenses of Jesus Christ. Now, I got to tell you, I just started having to use readers in order to read, which is very frustrating. But I found the blessing of it is that it helps magnify so that I can read books, read the Bible, whereas I had trouble with it, and it was a little blurry. It's the same with us. If we're looking through the lens of Jesus Christ, it helps magnify what is true and real. And it isn't blurry, and it certainly isn't dark. So we can conquer cynicism as we look through that lens of Jesus Christ. I want you to listen to a story in the New Testament about a cynic of Jesus who became a seeker of Jesus. I'm reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 45 to 51. Philip went to look for Nathanael and told him, we have found the very person Moses and the prophets wrote about. His name is Jesus, the son of Joseph, from Nazareth. Nazareth, explained Nathanael. Can anything good come from Nazareth? Come and see for yourself, Philip replied. As they approached, Jesus said, now here's a genuine son of Israel, a man of complete integrity. How do you know about me? Nathanael asked. Jesus replied, I could see you under the fig tree before Philip found you. Then Nathanael exclaimed, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. Jesus asked him, do you believe this just because I told you that I've seen you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than this. Then he said, I tell you the truth. You will see heaven open and the angels of God going up and down on the Son of Man, the one who is the stairway between heaven and earth. Philip tells Nathanael about Jesus. He wants him to meet Jesus. He says he found this man named Jesus and believed him to be the Messiah. But notice Nathanael's response. His response drips with cynicism. Nazareth? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip, I love the way Philip responds. He doesn't try to answer all the questions that he might have, doesn't try to convince him who Jesus is. He simply says, come and see for yourself. And when he says that, it inspires a sense of curiosity in Jesus. And Jesus inspires curiosity when he meets him. Jesus says to him, I tell you the truth, you will see heaven open and the angels of God going up and down on the Son of Man, the one who is the stairway between heaven and earth. I wonder if they thought back to the story of Jacob in the Old Testament, the grandson of Abraham, who had a vision of seeing this ladder going up into the heavens and angels coming up and down from them. Certainly a vision, a foreshadowing of Jesus, even back in the Old Testament. I wonder if he thought about that story that he heard long ago, about this ladder, when Jesus says, I am the stairway between heaven and earth. It certainly inspired a sense of curiosity. See, the thing about being cynical, cynics never change the world. They only just tell you why it can't be changed. The antidote for cynicism is curiosity. Not thinking you know all the answers, but actually being curious to learn new things. Curious people are not cynical, and cynical people are not generally curious. In this sermon this morning, I want to give you 3 keys to cultivating curiosity, to overcome cynicism. The first thing is to practice loving others. Now, I know we hear this a lot in the church, the importance of loving your neighbor, loving other people. Jesus gave us this command in John chapter 13, verse 34. He says, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. Now notice he says it's a command. He's making it clear. If you're going to follow Jesus, this is a command to love as I have loved. How did Jesus love people? How do we know how to follow his example? Well, we have it written throughout the Gospels. I highly recommend that you pick one, or even if you want to read all the Gospels, but maybe pick one Gospel and just ask this simple question as you read it through. Ask the question, how did Jesus demonstrate love? You can even write it in a journal if you like, but just go through the Gospel and note, how did Jesus demonstrate his love for others? Because if we're called to love people, if we're commanded to love people as he did, it's important to know how he did it. For example, Jesus loved people without reservation and without condition. We are called to do the same, to love people without reservation or condition. That doesn't mean that we are to become slaves to people to fulfill their every wish as a way of demonstrating love. It doesn't mean that we're to subject ourselves to abuse of any kind. It means that we look for that God image that is hidden beneath the soil of their sin, to see beyond the surface sin that taints that God image, to look for the actual image, that God-given holy image that is imprinted in all of us. Another way that Jesus acted was he initiated acts of love. He didn't wait for someone to love him first. He made the first move, and we're called to do the same, to take the initiative in demonstrating acts of love regardless of how people may reciprocate. Loving others pushes us beyond the cynical assumptions and begins to cultivate a sense of curiosity. The second way in which we do that, first we practice loving others. The second way is we practice listening to others. In James chapter 1, verse 19, James says, "Understand this, my brothers, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry." See, when somebody's angry, that listening ear becomes deaf. You may have experienced that yourself. I know I have. Somebody's angry at you, or you're angry at somebody. Your ears go deaf. You don't listen to other people. Now, James is the one that wrote this, and James is the brother of Jesus. And initially, James rejected Jesus, probably even angrily rejected Jesus as the Messiah. When Jesus started declaring himself to be the Messiah, his first reaction, his own brother says, "That's crazy." I remember when growing up with Jesus, Mama used to always come to me and say, "Why can't you be more like Jesus?" And when Mama put myself and Jesus in the bathtub to give us a bath, Jesus would start walking on top of the water. It was very frustrating growing up as a brother of Jesus. I just can't imagine him declaring himself to be the Messiah. But as James began to witness and began to see Jesus' love, Jesus teaching truth, and Jesus demonstrating his awesome power, James began to believe and began to recognize that there was no denying who this Jesus was, his own brother. And that's when James began to become quick to listen. And that's why he writes this, recognizing the value of the value of listening and seeing beyond our cynical assumptions about people. Cynics assume they already know the answers, but the curious assume that they could learn something new. So we need to practice loving others. We need to practice listening to others, to genuinely listen. Listen not just to their thoughts. Listen to their emotions. Don't listen to just what they think, but listen to what they feel. And the third thing that we're supposed to do is that helps cultivate curiosity is to practice leading others. We practice loving others, we practice listening to others, but to practice leading others. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 and 14, Jesus said this, "You," and he's talking to all of us, "you are the salt of the earth." And then he says, "You are the light of the world." See, we are all called to be influencers, and leadership is about influence. Now, granted, there are spiritual gifts of leadership. Some people have them and some don't. But that doesn't mean that the rest of us don't lead. It means that they have the special gifts to lead in certain areas, certain ways. But we are all called to be influence on others. We're all called to lead in a certain way. Husbands are called to be the spiritual leaders of the family. Fathers and mothers are called to lead their children. Older men and women are called to lead by our example the younger men and women. We are called all called to help make disciples of Jesus Christ. We're all to help coach people to grow in their faith. That's influence. That is leadership. And we're all called to be leaders. We're all called to be salt. We're all called to be light. Leading others cultivates a sense of curiosity in ourselves. And our cynicism is replaced with hope. We need to be aware of the lens in which we look through life to determine what is real, what is reality. And if you're looking through the lens, if you're looking through and you're seeing life as being dark and hopeless, recognize that you're looking through the shades of cynicism. And what you need to do is take off those sunglasses and put on the lens of Jesus, the clear lens of Jesus Christ. It enables us to see life the way he sees it. I mean, think about it. Jesus looks at our lives. He looks at our mess. And he sees more mess than we see in ourselves. And he looks at the mess of the world. And he still has a confident hope for each and every one of us. We should maintain that same confident hope. As we seek to push aside our cynicism and replenish a sense of curiosity, I want you to practice. Practice. I say practice because it's not just a mental concept of loving our neighbors or loving people. We need to demonstrate that, find the ways in which we can put it into action. So practice loving others. Practice listening to others. Practice leading others in the power of Jesus Christ. Because he commands us to do these things, he also equips us with the power to do it. He is working in us. He is working through us to accomplish what he desires for us to do, what he commands for us to do. So we have this great hope and confidence that we can do the very things he calls us to do. So come and see the difference that you can make. Come and see how you can make a difference in the power of mighty God. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.